What happens when one of America's toughest legends comes face to face with the unimaginable? In the peaceful golden hills of Hidden Hills, California, a ruthless cartel thought they could break into Sylvester Stallone's home and send a chilling message of fear. But what they didn't realize was that they were stepping straight into a storm they could never control. Before we dive into this gripping true story, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe for more powerful stories, and share your thoughts in the comments, because you're about to witness why real heroes never back down. Down the winding private road that led to Stallone's property, 5 matte black Chevrolet Suburbans rolled silently, headlights off, tires crunching softly against the gravel. Inside, men armed with rifles and grim intent tightened their grips. At their head was Santiago El Tiburon Rivera, an enforcer for the brutal Los Dientes cartel, recently emboldened after several minor victories along the southern border. Tonight's mission was clear: send a message. Sylvester Stallone, whose philanthropy had supported border security efforts and anti-cartel initiatives, had inadvertently become a symbol of resistance they wanted to crush. But Stallone wasn't the man they had seen in magazine covers or at red carpet events. He hadn't survived Hollywood or life by being soft, and he certainly hadn't built his dream home without thinking of the threats that fame could bring. The estate sprawled over 6 acres, secured by technology and instinct. Beyond the iron gates and picturesque gardens were unseen layers of defense: reinforced walls, underground panic rooms, thermal cameras, and a private security team composed of former military specialists. It wasn't just for show. Stallone had faced stalkers, threats, even past home invasions during his long career, and he had vowed never again. In a converted guest house near the main gate, his chief of security, Joe Carver, a retired U.S. Army Ranger, watched the surveillance monitors closely. The Suburbans appeared as blips on his screen. Carver's jaw clenched. He tapped a button on his earpiece. "Boss, we've got incoming. 5 vehicles. No lights. Looks organized." Stallone closed the worn leather journal he had been writing in and rose slowly. His body, still fit from decades of boxing training and disciplined living, moved with a quiet strength. He crossed the room to the antique gun safe tucked behind a sliding bookshelf and retrieved a custom Colt .45. "Go to lockdown protocol," he said calmly. His voice carried the same steady grit that once electrified movie theaters. Carver's team moved like clockwork. Lena Morales, a cybersecurity expert fresh from NSA assignments, activated electronic jammers that rendered cell phones and drones useless within the property's perimeter. 2 ex-SEALs, Nick Foster and Marcus Lane, took positions at key vantage points armed with non-lethal deterrents. The goal was containment, not bloodshed. As the Suburbans rolled to a halt outside the property, the cartel soldiers disembarked silently, moving with precision toward the front gate. Rivera's plan was simple: breach, intimidate, and if necessary, eliminate. He believed he was facing an aging celebrity, surrounded by a few sleepy bodyguards. He couldn't have been more wrong. The gate, seemingly left ajar, was an invitation. Rivera's men exchanged cautious glances, but pressed forward. As they passed through, hidden motion sensors embedded in the drive sent silent alarms to Carver's team. Lena monitored their every move from the control center, counting heat signatures. "They're splitting into 3 groups," Lena reported. "Front, side access, and a back route. Standard sweep formation." "Good," Carver muttered. Let's tighten the noose. Inside the main house, Stallone moved methodically, checking window locks and reinforcing inner doors with steel bolts hidden in the decorative molding. The emergency lights flickered on, a soft red glow that left rooms barely illuminated but allowed defenders to see intruders in stark contrast. Rivera's team reached the sprawling front lawn and paused. In the moonlight, the house looked serene, almost abandoned. No guards in sight, no barking dogs, no alarms. "Move fast!" Rivera ordered in a low growl. "Get in! Grab him! Film it for the boss." He never saw the first trap. As the lead men stepped onto the manicured lawn, hidden pressure sensors triggered automated floodlights that exploded to life with blinding intensity. Simultaneously, high-frequency sound emitters shrieked at disorienting levels, sending waves of pain through the attackers' eardrums. Two cartel men dropped their weapons instinctively, hands clapping over their ears. "Ambush!" someone yelled in Spanish, but their words were lost in the cacophony. Carver watched the chaos unfold on his screens, lips pressing into a thin line. He tapped his headset. "Activate external lockdown. Initiate Phase 2. All around the estate, hidden barriers rose from the earth. Steel walls disguised as garden hedges, reinforced bollards at the main driveways, locking the intruders inside the property. Stallone's mansion had transformed into a fortress. Still, Rivera was no amateur. Shielding his eyes from the glaring lights, he barked orders in Spanish, rallying his team toward the side entrances. They regrouped, battered but not broken. They had numbers, and they had guns. What they didn't have was control. From concealed sniper blinds atop the second-story eaves, Foster and Lane watched their targets maneuver. Each attacker carried an automatic weapon, but their movements were panicked, unfocused. "No clear shots yet," Foster muttered. "They're still clustered." "Let them come," Lane replied. "They'll bottle themselves." Inside the mansion, Stallone moved to the command console embedded within an antique armoire. One hand rested on the Colt. The other flipped switches that deployed further countermeasures. Dense fog released into the yard from hidden vents, reducing visibility to mere feet. Infrared lasers creating invisible tripwires across entryways. The men outside coughed and stumbled through the thickening mist, struggling to see. Meanwhile, at the rear of the house, a second group of cartel soldiers located what they thought was a vulnerable service entrance. A single wooden door, slightly ajar. Rivera himself led the charge, shouldering through the door and into what appeared to be a mudroom. He signaled his men to fan out. Then the door slammed behind them with an ominous mechanical click. Reinforced steel shutters dropped over the windows. From hidden ducts, non-lethal but incapacitating gas hissed into the room. Panic surged. Rivera's men beat futilely at the fortified walls. Several tried firing at the steel barriers, the shots ricocheting harmlessly. Rivera clutched his scarf to his face and roared orders, but it was too late. Their radios jammed, their vision clouded, their exit routes gone. In the control room, Lena nodded at the readouts. "Rear entry team neutralized," she confirmed. "No fatalities." Carver allowed himself a grim smile. "Perfect. Now let's deal with the stragglers." Stallone stood quietly in the shadowed hallway outside his study, listening to the distant echoes of chaos. His face, lined by years of battles both fictional and real, remained unreadable. He knew what was coming next. The moment of desperation. The moment when men trained in violence realized they were outmatched not by firepower, but by preparation and resolve. The minutes dragged on under the fog-soaked moonlight. The remaining cartel members, cut off from their leader, stumbled blindly through the grounds, seeking shelter or an escape they would not find. The dense mist clung to their skin and blurred their vision, while the infrared lasers remained invisible and merciless. One man triggered a laser tripwire, and a sharp crack echoed through the air as compressed air cannons fired bean bags at high velocity, knocking him off his feet and disarming him instantly. Another tried to vault a flower bed, only to be brought down by a near-invisible net that sprang up from the soil, tangling him like a fly caught in a web. At the control station, Lena monitored each takedown with professional detachment. "We have 6 immobilized," she said into the comms. 4 still mobile, but confused. They're splitting up." Carver leaned over her shoulder, tracking the dwindling dots on the screen. "Keep pressure on them. Herd them to Zone 3. Out on the grounds, Nick and Marcus moved into action, shifting from observation to containment. They advanced through the mist with infrared visors, moving silently like wraiths. When one cartel soldier broke into a desperate sprint across the rose garden, Marcus was waiting. He tackled the man from behind, disarming him in one fluid motion and zip-tying his wrists before the attacker even had time to scream. Nearby, Nick used a tranquilizer dart to silently put down another would-be gunman who was attempting to scale the south wall. The grounds became a silent battlefield where one side was armed and aggressive, but utterly blind, while the other side was calm, patient, and in complete control. Inside the mansion, Stallone moved back to the study, keeping the Colt at his side. He didn't expect the fight to come inside. His team was too good, but he was prepared if it did. He glanced up at the portrait of Rocky Balboa on the wall, a younger version of himself staring back with unbreakable determination. For a moment, he allowed himself a wry smile. Life, like the movies, had a way of testing a man's endurance. As he listened to the chaos unfold, he thought not of fear, but of resilience, of every punch he had taken and every time he had gotten back up. This was just another round in a much longer fight. Outside, Rivera, coughing and blinking through the gas in the sealed mudroom, finally made a desperate move. He found a maintenance hatch hidden behind a cabinet and pried it open with a crowbar taken from a nearby storage shelf. Dragging 2 of his least affected men with him, he squeezed into the narrow crawl space that led under the house. Stallone's security team anticipated even this. Sensors embedded in the crawlspace walls alerted Lena instantly. "Boss, they're in the crawlspace under Sector C," she said crisply. Carver responded immediately, triggering a lockdown sequence that vented non-lethal pepper spray into the tunnels. The cartel men screamed as their eyes and throats burned, scrambling back the way they had come. Rivera alone pressed forward, stubborn and seething with rage, wiping tears from his burning eyes with a rag tied around his mouth. He would not return empty-handed. He would not fail. In the grand hall above, Stallone listened intently as the distant scrape of Rivera's desperate crawl echoed through the vents. He didn't move. He waited. Rivera emerged finally in a maintenance room adjacent to the main kitchen, his clothes torn, his face twisted in fury. He stumbled toward the hallway, raising his weapon, and came face to face with Sylvester Stallone. There was a beat of stunned silence, like the air itself held its breath. Rivera hadn't truly believed he would confront the man himself, and certainly not like this. Stallone standing firm, his eyes sharp and unwavering, a living embodiment of the legends he portrayed. "You picked the wrong house," Stallone said, voice low, steady, carrying the weight of every underdog fight he had ever portrayed. Rivera, blinded by rage, lifted his weapon. Stallone fired first. The Colt barked once, clean and controlled, hitting Rivera in the shoulder. Rivera spun, the gun flying from his hands as he crashed to the marble floor with a grunt of pain. Stallone approached, keeping his weapon trained on the fallen man. From the side corridors, Nick and Marcus appeared, moving swiftly to secure Rivera, zip-tying his wrists behind his back. Rivera glared up at Stallone with a mixture of hatred and disbelief. "You think you've won?" he rasped in broken English. "More will come." Stallone knelt briefly, his face just inches from Rivera's. "Then they better pack a lunch," he said quietly, "because they're gonna be here a long time." Outside, the sound of sirens began to pierce the night air, a symphony of approaching police, sheriff's deputies, and federal agents from the Los Angeles field office. The fog began to lift, revealing the aftermath. Cartel soldiers lying zip-tied and disarmed across the manicured lawns, captured with minimal injuries but maximum humiliation. Officers poured through the gates, weapons raised but quickly lowered as they saw the scene under control. Carver stepped forward to meet LAPD's Captain Brian Holt, a seasoned officer who had dealt with enough Hollywood drama to recognize when something truly serious had gone down. 15 hostiles, Carver reported succinctly. "No fatalities, all captured, all armed. Attempted armed invasion. Surveillance footage available on demand." Captain Holt whistled softly. "This is one for the books," he said. His gaze swept the property, taking in the hidden defenses now emerging from the mist. "And Stallone? He's safe?" "Better than safe," Carver said with a faint smile. "He's ready for round 2 if they're stupid enough to send it." Inside the house, Stallone holstered his Colt and moved to the front entrance. He opened the grand oak doors himself, greeting the officers and agents who entered with a nod that was both welcoming and commanding. Captain Holt approached, his expression respectful. "Mr. Stallone," he said, "you're a hard man to surprise." Stallone shrugged. "Comes with the territory," he said. "You either prepare or you pay." As the authorities took statements, processed the attackers, and gathered evidence, Stallone moved among them quietly, offering handshakes, answering questions, and checking on his team. They were tired but unharmed. Lena had already begun downloading all security footage onto encrypted drives for the FBI. Nick and Marcus helped load the captured cartel soldiers into armored transport vans. Carver debriefed the field commanders with brisk professionalism. Stallone paused at the top of the wide staircase leading from the entrance hall, looking down over the scene unfolding in his home. This wasn't a movie set. There were no retakes, no stunt doubles. Tonight had been real, and they had won. By the time the sun began its slow rise over hidden hills, the estate was a hive of official activity. Crime scene investigators photographed the grounds, dusted the Suburbans for fingerprints, and cataloged every weapon, every boot print, every footprint left in the disturbed soil. A mobile command center from the FBI had parked outside the gates, flashing lights bathing the early morning mist in blue and red. Reporters clustered beyond the perimeter, straining for a glimpse, their telephoto lenses catching only the backs of armored vans as they ferried the last of the captured cartel soldiers away. Inside the mansion, Stallone sat with Agent Caroline Weller from the FBI's Organized Crime Division, reviewing preliminary reports. Her expression was a mix of admiration and disbelief as she flipped through the data compiled by Lena and Carver. "Mr. Stallone," she said, tapping a highlighted section, "your security protocols neutralized an entire cartel strike team in under 45 minutes, with 0 casualties. That's extraordinary." Stallone offered a tired half-smile. "Experience teaches you a few things. Bad guys count on fear. If you don't give it to them, they don't know what to do." Weller nodded, clearly impressed. "We'll need your full cooperation for the ongoing investigation. These men," she gestured to the photos spread out on the table, "weren't just hired guns. They're part of Santiago Rivera's direct network. By capturing them, we've cracked open a major vein of Los Dientes operations inside the U.S. Stallone leaned back in his chair, rubbing the back of his neck. "Glad I could help. Just wasn't exactly how I planned to spend my night." In the living room, Carver briefed the incoming Department of Homeland Security team, handing over encrypted drives containing the night's surveillance footage. Meanwhile, Lena worked closely with FBI cyber forensics experts to trace the cartel's communications, piecing together a larger picture of how they had planned the attack. Every recovered phone, radio, and laptop became a thread unraveling a network thought to be untouchable. Stallone, despite being the center of the assault, stayed involved, not retreating to the background like some detached celebrity. He understood the stakes. His confrontation with Rivera had not only protected his home, but opened a rare opportunity to cripple a growing threat. As he walked the grounds later that afternoon, flanked by Carver and Captain Holt, the damage was surprisingly minimal. A few trampled rose bushes, some scorched patches on the lawn where gas canisters had discharged, broken hedges where 2 attackers had crashed trying to escape, small scars compared to what could have happened. Stallone paused near the front gate, looking at the reinforced barriers now standing tall and immovable. Captain Holt joined him, arms folded. "You built a fortress, Sly. Most folks never think they'll need it until it's too late." Stallone nodded thoughtfully. "It's like training for a fight. You hope you don't need it, but when the bell rings, you better be ready." Holt chuckled quietly. "Well, you were ready, all right. Between you and your team, you saved lives tonight, not just your own." Stallone said nothing, just watched the final forensic teams load up and roll away. In the days that followed, the story exploded across the national media. It dominated cable news cycles, morning shows, podcasts, and late-night talk shows. Footage of the Suburbans rolling into hidden hills, leaked aerial shots of the fog-blanketed estate, rumors of Stallone confronting armed cartel soldiers himself. Some stories embellished, turning him into a Hollywood action hero once again. But those close to the situation knew the truth. It had been preparation, discipline, and teamwork that had saved the day, not bravado.
Public opinion rallied around Stallone. He became a symbol not just of American resilience, but of the power of readiness, of not allowing wealth or fame to breed complacency. Commentators pointed out how few celebrities fortified their homes beyond aesthetic measures. Stallone had shown what real protection and real responsibility looked like. Invitations poured in for interviews, speeches, even congressional hearings on organized crime, but he declined most. Stallone wasn't interested in the spotlight. Instead, he focused on supporting the investigation. Working quietly behind the scenes, he connected the FBI with private security experts he knew from years of preparation. He authorized access to his property's surveillance archives, even signed off on limited media tours, carefully managed, to demystify what had happened without revealing sensitive details. A week later, at a private ceremony hosted by the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, Stallone was honored with the Citizen Valor Award. He accepted it humbly, standing at the podium in a simple Navy suit, looking out over a crowd of law enforcement officers, prosecutors, and community leaders. "I'm not a hero," he said into the microphone, his voice low and steady. "I'm just a guy who got ready for something he hoped would never happen. And when it did, I had the right people beside me. Courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being prepared to do the right thing when fear comes knocking." The room erupted in applause. He shook hands with young officers who had grown up watching his movies, accepted their thanks with quiet grace, and afterward slipped away before the evening turned into a photo opportunity he didn't need. Back at the estate that night, Stallone sat alone on the terrace, a glass of bourbon resting on the arm of his chair. The evening breeze stirred the eucalyptus trees, carrying the faint sounds of hidden hills settling into its usual sleepy calm. Carver joined him after a while, carrying 2 cigars. He handed one to Stallone wordlessly. They lit up, smoke curling lazily into the twilight. For a long time, neither man spoke. They didn't have to. Finally, Carver broke the silence. "You know, boss, the cartel's not used to losing, especially not like this." Stallone exhaled a thin stream of smoke. "Good. Let them remember." Carver nodded. "They will. Word's already getting around. Hitting you wasn't just a failure. It was a warning to every two-bit thug with a fantasy of making a name for himself." Stallone smiled faintly. "Sometimes you don't need to win every fight. You just need to make it hurt enough they think twice about starting one." The months rolled on, and with the evidence gathered from the raid, federal authorities launched sweeping operations against Los Dientes. Major safe houses were raided from San Diego to Tucson. Drug corridors collapsed under pressure. Funding networks were disrupted. Arrests multiplied. By spring, Santiago Rivera had been extradited back to Mexico, facing a list of charges long enough to guarantee he would never see freedom again. Meanwhile, Stallone's estate remained his sanctuary, but its legend grew quietly. Security firms studied his case, law enforcement agencies updated their protocols. Quietly, without fanfare, he had changed the way America thought about protecting its own. As summer warmed the California hills, Stallone continued his life with the same quiet discipline that had carried him through decades of triumphs and setbacks. He trained in his private gym each morning, wrote in his study each afternoon, and spent evenings with his family when they visited, sharing laughter and stories around the fire pit. He didn't dwell on the night the cartel came. He didn't live in fear of it returning. He had faced the storm and remained standing. That was enough. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of crimson and gold over hidden hills, a neighbor walking past called up to him over the fence. "Hey, Sly," he shouted with a grin. "Heard you took on a whole cartel and won. What's next?" Stallone leaned on the railing, the ghost of a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Same as always," he called back. "Keep punching." And with that, Sylvester Stallone turned back toward his home, ready for whatever came next, embodying the same spirit that had made him an icon, not just on the silver screen, but in the hearts of all those who believe that no matter how hard life hits, The only real choice is to stand up, square your shoulders, and hit back harder.